We are embarking on draft season. Combine not that far away. Pro day visits. Already have the Senior Bowl in the rearview mirror, and no one better to talk about all that than Pittsburgh's draft guru, Carnegie Mellon Zone, so you know he's very smart, from CBSSports.com. Ryan Wilson back to talk draft with us here on Pony and Muller. All right, Ryan, you were down in Mobile a couple of weeks ago. Give us, from your bird's eye view, your biggest Steelers draft takeaway from the workouts that went on there.
Well, I mean, there were some offensive linemen that balled out, so that's good news if that's the flavor you're looking for in terms of the first round. I had my eyes on the quarterbacks because I'm of the opinion that should not be out of the conversation if you're the Steelers. Ton of wide receivers as well, and maybe that's something you consider, if not on day one, then day two and even day three. But there are going to be some dudes that are going to get drafted out of Mobile that played in the practice during the week. A couple of them didn't play during the Saturday game, and that's okay. But Troy Fautanu out of Oregon State, there's a lot of buzz that the Jets might be high on him, and they pick certainly ahead of the Steelers. Tyler Guyton out of Oklahoma had a good week. Patrick Paul out of Houston also had a good week. All big, strong, athletic offensive linemen that are certainly going to have a chance to play on day one. So the Chucks got released a few days ago, so they'll be looking for some depth there and maybe reshuffling of the O-line depending on what they do with Broderick Jones and Dan Moore Jr. So you can never have enough offensive linemen, and I think if that's the direction you're going, if you're rolling with Kenny Pickett, then why not protect him? And last time we were thinking about doing this, I think they just hired Arthur Smith, Pony, so I wasn't able to do it. But I was talking to some folks in Mobile about Arthur Smith because I was at first a little apprehensive, and they said this is a great hire. Like they like the idea of Arthur Smith coming in and doing the things he did at Tennessee. And some guys aren't head coach material. Dick LeBeau was a much better coordinator than the head coach, and maybe that's the path for Arthur Smith. And I think while it's not a quote-unquote sexy hire, or maybe a Kubiak tree hire or Shanahan tree hire, this might be the right fit for Pittsburgh. It's just a matter at the end of the day to making sure you get the quarterback.
Ryan, of those quarterbacks that you did see in Mobile, who impressed you the most?
It was probably Carter Bradley, Gus Bradley's son out of South Alabama. I didn't know a lot about him, watched a couple games coming in. He's not going to be a first-round pick. Maybe he sneaks into the day two. He was fun to watch. But in terms of the big names, the Michael Penix Jr.'s, the Bo Nix's, the Sam Hartman was there. I thought Spencer Rattler probably did the most for himself. Came in at just over 6 feet, so he was one of the shorter quarterbacks there. Had one of the biggest arms. Joe Milton had the biggest arm, but Joe Milton struggled with the things that we saw at Tennessee in the fall, mostly accuracy and decision-making. But Spencer Rattler, I loved the way he played in the fall behind a bad offensive line, and made a lot out of a little for a South Carolina team that was often overmatched in the SEC. He's tough. It feels like he's learned from some of the missteps he had at Oklahoma, both as a quote-unquote team leader and in the locker room and as a player. And I like him as a day two guy. Now, I don't know where his best fit is in terms of drafting him. But in terms of the guys we were interested in seeing, the Bo Nixes and Michael Penix Jr. of the world, they didn't do a whole bunch. Michael Penix Jr. didn't play in the game on Saturday. Bo Nix played one series and did pretty well. Both those guys maintained about where I thought they would be. I love Michael Penix's first-round pick, but I've talked to teams that think he's a third-round pick, and that to me is sort of crazy. But that's why this process is so hard to figure out. And by 2 or 3 or 4 years from now, we look back and say, oh, we were right about that and wrong about that, and that's what makes it sort of fun.
Ryan, why do you think there is so much disagreement over Penix?
Primarily, I think it starts with the injury history. So when he was at Indiana a few years ago, Pony, he had 2 ACLs and 2 shoulders, and that's a red flag. So, but if he clears medical, he clears medical. He wasn't injured the last 2 years at Washington. He's incredibly tough to bring down. We saw that for much of the season. He struggled against Michigan, but every team struggled against that Michigan defense. I don't think that's necessarily a knock against him. Aiden Hutchinson struggled against Georgia. Turns out Aiden Hutchinson is still a good football player. These things happen against really good football teams. That's one of the knocks. I've heard there's some questions about mental toughness. I don't know what that means because that's just what I heard from a few folks. From what I've seen in terms of the way he's overcome injuries and the way he's played week in and week out, there's a lot to love about his game. And that's why I like him as a first-round pick. But we'll go through this process. We have 72 days until the draft, 2 weeks until the combine, and we'll get a closer look and a better idea of what these guys are once they start going through the interview process, and you sort of hear back from that through the grapevine there. But the injuries are probably the biggest concern. He has enormous hands, 10 3/8. So it's just like he's holding a softball when he throws a football, and he can absolutely spin it.
Oh, my God, he'd engulf Kenny's hands.
It'd be like Andre the Giant holding that can of beer.
Yes, exactly. That's the visual. Absolutely.
What about defensive backs, Ryan, that were down there? Because we know the Steelers still feel like they need to bolster that secondary, specifically corner, even with Joey Porter Jr. having such a strong rookie year.
Quinyon Mitchell put on an absolute show. Cornerback out of Toledo. You watch him in the fall, and he's big, long, fast, a lot of pass breakups. Can get a little handsy at times, but you know what? We used to say that about Joey Porter Jr. coming out of Penn State. And I do my little draft podcast with Rick Spielman, and he said that's the easiest thing to fix. You have a good defensive backs coach, you can get rid of handsy players. You want guys who are aggressive. And Quinyon Mitchell came in and was shutting guys down in one-on-one drills, shutting guys down in the team drills. He didn't play in the game, nor did he need to play. But I think he's going to have a real push to be cornerback one off the board in a pretty deep group of guys. He was so much fun, and it's fun to see guys like that go out and absolutely ball out. There are a ton of guys that had good weeks. Cam Hart out of Notre Dame was a long corner, a little more straight line than side to side in terms of comparing him to Quinyon Mitchell. DJ James and Nehemiah Pritchett both had good weeks out of Auburn. I'm trying to think. Chris Abrams-Drain out of Missouri had a really good week. His teammate, Ennis Rickstraw, was supposed to play, but he opted out at the last minute. He's gotten some first-round buzz, but two really competitive and physical cornerbacks, even though they're not huge. And it reminded me a little bit in terms of the physicality we saw from Devin Witherspoon last year. Not that level of playmaking ability, but being slightly undersized, but not being afraid to run through a brick wall. Who else do we have there? Max Melton out of Rutgers, Bo Melton's brother, who plays for the Packers. He had a great week. Georgia had some dudes there. Tyke Smith plays a safety position, and then Javon Bullard plays a Nick sort of role, and he's a guy that I like as a top 40 pick. We'll see how it works out. A little undersized, but I love the edge with which he played. So there are a bunch of guys like the wide receivers as they get better coming up from high school into the college ranks. Same thing with the defensive backs have to cover these guys. And there are a lot of guys who are physical specimens who can make plays on the ball.